See how the YouTube works. All right, it would appear that we are live on YouTube, not Facebook. So some had some Facebook glitch this morning. Oh. That won't work.
Technical difficulties.
I can't listen to myself talk. That's
No, I can't deal with that.
I can just mute this. That's all I can do. There we go. This will work. So now I will watch live here. We will get this figured out, friends. All right. We're going to be good to go now. Let me get my volume back to where I can hear Dr. G. Welcome, everybody. Dr. Nate Blume with Life Refined Chiropractic. Once again, Friday, hosting our great mentor and expert, Dr. Stephen Geanopulos. Thank you, Dr. G, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, great. So we meant to go Facebook Live today. I promised you one of our viewers last week requested we do some info on premenopausal hormone balancing for females, something that we get asked a lot about in the office. And my expert that I go to a lot of times is going to be Dr. G for those types of things. We've had great success helping our practice members traverse this what can be a very difficult time for a lot of women. Most of you are probably at this point going, Dr. Nate, don't you practice with your wife? Might she not be the better person for this interview? And you know what? Neither she nor I are the expert. Dr. G is the expert. And so we decided that he and I could roll this today and do just fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. My experience with female hormones is purely secondhand.
Yeah. So, well, you know, I remember my mom going through menopause and hot flashes, and I've had, you know, countless women in the office that just talk about, oh my gosh, if I'm going to get a massage, I'm always too hot, you know, these fluctuations. So we're going to talk about some of those things today. Now, Dr. Stacy's going to link this YouTube Live in our Facebook page. So hopefully those of you that had intended on watching via Facebook are still going to find us, and then we can get some real-time questions and get those asked by our expert today in real time. If not, submit the questions below. We'll repost this video. We are recording it, and then we'll get those follow-ups answered to you and possibly just revisit this topic again in the future. So let's just start with this. We'll jump right in, Dr. G. What is it about menopause that, it seems to me that it's happening earlier in some females than it used to. It seems to me that sometimes the symptoms are now more kind of through the roof off the charts. Is there an autoimmune component? Just kind of give us the broad strokes of exactly when people talk about, you know, the hormone changes that come with menopause, what are people building up to, and what age is it? Yes.
No, those are all great questions. So there's a lot to unwrap here, and we're not going to do it all in the time we have, but we'll do the best we can to kind of give people a 10,000-foot view so they can zero in on where they need to focus. So when it comes to menopause or premenopausal symptoms that people have, and then of course menopausal symptoms, those can be pretty severe. We know that, and you know, a lot of for many years, we've been experimenting with providing people with either synthetic hormone replacement or even bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And the first question we have to ask is, are we supposed to have symptoms? Are women supposed to have symptoms when it comes to menopause? And there's a little bit of controversy there, because there's no controversy in the first world industrialized nations like the United States. But if we look at you know, societies that are a little bit more primitive, hunter-gatherer societies that we've studied, they don't even have a word in some of those cultures for menopausal symptoms because they don't have any. And the reason for that, and the reason why we take hormone replacement therapy, is because there's a sudden drop, and you can see it on blood work. I mean, there's an absolute sudden drop in the production of hormones by the female ovaries. And that's normal, and that's supposed to happen. However, there are supposed to be a trace amount of hormone produced produced by a different organ called the adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands can produce, if healthy, enough trace hormone so that the woman doesn't have to experience symptoms at all, or severe symptoms like they might be experiencing. So the question really is menopause, should that happen? Well, of course it should, but the symptoms could be coming from a stress placed on the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands, you and I know, and it's commonly known as the stress organ, right? But, and that's true. We can deplete the ability for the many hormones produced by the adrenal glands by focusing on the stress hormone called cortisol. And we can kind of pull those resources out of the body to produce cortisol, leaving the production of other hormones negligent, and therefore the person is going to suffer more symptoms. So that's just kind of an overview of what menopause is supposed to be. Now, at the same time, there's other things we do in our lives, with our lifestyle choices that can also stress the hormone system at a delicate time. So premenopausal symptoms can be anywhere from 40, 42 years of age on the young side, all the way into the early 50s. And then, of course, when you hit menopause, it's different for everybody. It could be in the mid to late 40s. It could be in the early to mid 50s. Depending on the person, and perhaps when they actually started getting their cycle when they were younger. So if you started getting your cycle, let's say at 14 or 15 years of age, your experience might be very different than somebody who started getting it at 9 or 10 years of age. When you asked me, is it changing? Is it different now? Well, yes, it's different now. We have different lifestyle stressors being placed on us from the time we're children or even just born. All the way into our adulthood, and all of the aspects of the cycle can be interfered with along the way. There's just so many variables. We can't really point to one thing.
Got it. So you mentioned the adrenal. What type of lifestyle stress over time is going to affect our adrenals or condition them that would position us in a spot where menopause is going to be more drastic for us? I say us like it's me, but really we're talking about, for humans.
Yes, we are going to ask our audience to please forgive us for any male imposed biases, in language. But so there are some lifestyle choices we make that we think are just absolutely perfectly healthy. For example, exercise. In my community, it's a community in northern New Jersey where we belong to Lifetime Fitness, and it's just a great place it's like a country club for working out, and they have all these great classes. And the most popular classes are the high intensity interval training classes, the HIIT classes, the ones that make you sweat and your heart beats and everything is great. And I always joke and I say the 40-plus-year-old women in my community look like they're 24. They're absolutely gorgeous. They're slim. They're lean. They healthy because they work out quite a bit. They do pay attention to their diet. But I will say that there is some overtraining going on. If you're doing a high intensity interval training class where you exceed your heart, if we were to just say your heart rate gets to a high level for an extended period of time, multiple times a week, you can actually initiate a lot of stress hormone production, which can then take away from your ability to naturally produce normal hormones. So on the lifestyle side, people thinking they're doing the right thing, perhaps there's not a good balance between the high intensity training and what I call long duration, low intensity training. And that could be as simple for many people as going for long walks. I think there should be a balance ratio there. I think there's benefit and value to high intensity working out, and there's great benefit and value to low intensity types of exercise. I think the younger you are, the more frequently you can do the high intensity stuff. The older you are, 40 plus, the more targeted that high intensity should be, perhaps just 1 or 2 times a week. I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback from the diehards there, but there's a lot of research and I see it in my practice. I mean, sometimes people come to me and they say, hey, doc, should I take hormone replacement therapy? Should I get on medication or take bioidentical hormones? And my first answer is, well, I'm not the right doctor to ask. That's not my specialty. That's not what I do. What I do is I try to normalize your body physiology. And then if you still, if you find that you don't have those symptoms and you don't really see a need to do the hormone replacement, then great, you make that choice with your doctor. I'm not saying there's no reason, there are good reasons to do hormone replacement therapy for some people. It's just not the decision that I like to make for my patients.
So I think that brings us to a great point that that the questioner had asked. I feel that they are, not to the point of menopause yet, but probably asking, what can we do right now to set the table so that when we do enter into that portion of our life, what can we do that's going to make that as easy as possible? What can we do to minimize the likelihood that the females are going to experience severe swings in mood, temperature, and all those things? What are some lifestyle things pre-menopause that they can be doing?
The number one thing is to get your blood sugar under control. Nothing is a bigger stressor to the stress gland. So we call the adrenal gland the stress gland. Well, I'm not of the opinion we're not supposed to have stress. We are supposed to have stress, and we want to exercise that system. Unfortunately, abnormal swings in blood sugar will cause abnormal swings in blood sugar hormones, insulin, and cortisol. Now, when I say the word cortisol, you say, no, that's not a blood sugar hormone, that's a stress hormone. No. It's also a sleep hormone. It's also a blood sugar hormone. It's also a stress hormone. So you can stress the cortisol system without life stress that we perceive as stress, bills to pay, relationship problems, all of those things that qualify as stress for sure. But abnormal blood sugar regulation through diet and lifestyle is the number one thing you can do to normalize all of your hormones. So to back up a little bit, there are 600 hormones in the body, and they're all related to each other. I always say that sex hormones for men and women exist downstream from more primary hormones that we are releasing on a daily and cyclical basis related to blood sugar, and that would be cortisol and insulin and a few more, but cortisol and insulin are the big ones. So we need to normalize that first before we can ask our body to have a normalized sex hormone system. So we go to blood sugar first, getting that dialed in. A low carbohydrate diet is probably the best way to do that. Practicing time-restricted eating is probably the best way to become insulin sensitive, which means that you just require a smaller amount of insulin today than you did yesterday to do the same job. So we want our insulin system to be very sensitive. A great way to do that is to lower your carbohydrates. So if there are 3 kinds of food, fat, protein, and carbohydrate, take the carbohydrate portion, lower that, and then having a time of day in which you don't eat food. It could be a 12-hour portion of a 24-hour cycle. Some people like to do 14 hours. I like to do 16 to 18 hours. And I make sure I have a good, healthy diet during the other 6 to 8 hours that I eat or that my wife eats in order to have a good blood sugar control system.
Good. So that brings us to one of the other questions that we had from our Facebook Live last week, which is intermittent fasting, or as you call it, time-restricted eating. I think that's a really important component to a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about during these interviews. And I'm going to dedicate an entire, probably our next interview, an entire interview just to that topic. So you touched on it. I think we can leave it there for now. But let's ask, how can people monitor? I mean, how do we monitor our blood sugar and our insulin? How do we know where it is? Do we have to get a blood monitor and check that throughout the day? Do we need to do fasting blood sugars? What can people do? Average, Joe and Jane, what can they do to monitor blood sugar and insulin?
Blood monitoring of sugar and other fuels in your body are actually quite easy and cheap, and people can get instruction from doctors like yourself and myself on how to do that, where you just take almost like a pinprick of blood, put it into a little machine. It tells you what your blood sugar levels are at. I find that to be completely unnecessary. I think the best way to know is just kind of observe yourself over a period of 3 days. Are you waking up after a full night's sleep with energy to get out of bed and start your day? Do you find yourself after a meal nodding off and feeling like you need to take a nap? Are you experiencing brain fog? Now, if I say, are you experiencing brain fog, and you want to ask me the question, what is brain fog? Well, then you probably aren't experiencing it. But people who experience brain fog know exactly what I'm talking about. So brain fog is kind of that feeling of, what was I thinking about, or what am I supposed to be doing right now? It's a difficult thing to explain, but once you've experienced it, it requires no explanation. So brain fog, waking up tired. I'm sorry?
I said, I think most people could relate to that. Just think back to high school after you'd eat that oh so nutritious lunch and then go to your next class. Just think about trying to stay awake or follow the teacher. Virtually impossible after you've eaten a high carbohydrate, low nutrient dense food. That's exactly what we're talking about.
For sure. And for our female listeners, this is very important here. One of the things that many women go through is this feeling of low blood sugar. Okay. So if a certain amount of time has passed in which you did not eat, and some of our female patients will wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry, I have a cup of coffee, they run through the day, run full speed, and all of a sudden they get shaky and jittery, and then they have to grab something, whether it's their neighbor's arm or a donut. It's usually something, again, if they're not paying attention to their diet and their health, they're going to grab a bagel, a donut, something very carbohydrate rich. But there are people who pay more attention to their health. They know they have this tendency, and therefore they won't allow themselves to go 3 hours without putting some kind of food in their mouth. And those are people that we have a name for them, we call them reactive hypoglycemics. And all that means is their blood sugar drops and they get symptoms. So either they let themselves get symptoms and then they have a donut or something to get rid of those symptoms, some orange juice or something, or they just won't let that happen and they'll make sure they eat multiple times a day. Here's the problem with that. That means you are metabolically inflexible. You're depending on cortisol, the stress hormone that makes you feel jittery. That feeling of your blood sugar drops, you start getting that jittery feeling, maybe some feeling of nausea. That means your adrenal glands are firing up and they're looking to manufacture sugar. And when we go into the time-restricted eating portion, we'll talk more about why that happens and how we can actually switch to a different kind of fuel if we teach our body to do so. So I hope I didn't go too far off tangent there.
No, I don't think so. I think that really kind of drives home the value that we'll have when we go into the intermittent fasting time-restricted eating portion in our next interview. So what types of foods, I think we kind of addressed that. What types of we talked about exercise, we talked about foods. What type of things for people that are already experiencing menopause symptoms? What can they do real time right now? Maybe is there something they should ask their doctor to do some tests? Is there anything that they can look for to help steer themselves out of the weeds if they find themselves miserable from menopause?
Sure. I mean, if you're in if you're getting symptoms, but you still have your cycle and you're not menopause, you may want to ask your doctor to do a hormone panel. And in the hormone panel, they'll look at things that actually are released by the brain in order to tell your organs to do what they're supposed to do. We call that LH and FSH. Those are important because the FSH can actually start to skyrocket once true menopause is setting in. And knowing that can be helpful. There's no doubt, because you want to have the ability to make good choices with you, your doctor, and making choices for your lifestyle. I've had no shortage of patients, no matter what stage they were in, pre-menopause, menopause, or post-menopause, where we made dramatic changes in how they feel. Again, we're not here to cure menopause. It's going to happen. We just want people to feel well and healthy, which you should be able to do. I don't think that women are designed to suffer during this time in their life. I just don't. I don't think suffering is necessary or mandatory. So what people can do is, first of all, find out not only where they're where they're at as far as the stages of menopause, but also you need to know what your metabolic health is like. We already talked about blood sugar. There's different ways to measure that in your blood work that can give us not only traction on understanding today, but more importantly, what's been going on for several months. And also inflammation is going to play a big role here. Millions and millions of women are taking or have taken many, many years of birth control pills. Birth control pills are, this is not any judgment on birth control pills, but there are consequences and we should know what those consequences are. We do ask our body to take this excess hormone that is typically synthetic, and we have to metabolize it. And we don't all metabolize it the same way or as efficiently. And that can interfere with a lot of things. For example, much of your thyroid hormone function will be dramatically impacted by birth control pills or the estrogens in birth control pills. It will also tax your liver's ability to remove the excess hormone because that's where it happens. And so there's quite a few different pathways that we would have to understand in order to know if there's any choices you have made either now or in the past that could interfere. So for example, if you had been on birth control pills for 10 years and then decided to get off, well, then you'd want to know more about your thyroid hormone's ability to not only be produced, but also once the thyroid hormone is produced and your doctor says, hey, your thyroid's fine, well, then what's happening to that thyroid hormone? Is it properly being converted? Are there too many proteins produced that lock onto the hormone so you can't use it? There are different blood tests that we can do to see if that's happening. Because again, thyroid hormone is a hormone. All hormones are related to all hormones. So blood sugar hormones, thyroid hormones, sleep hormones, and then of course, downstream from those, we have the sex hormones that we're discussing here.
That brings me to a couple of questions. Number one, you started that answer with, go to your doctor, get a hormone test. Are there different types of tests? I know there are. Some of them are a single check to see where our hormone levels are. Some of them involve saliva tests over a 30-day period. What should people be looking at, and is that dependent on age?
It froze up there for a second. Is that dependent on?
On their age. What test will be the best for them?
Sure.
Is that dependent upon age, whether they're pre, during, or post-menopause?
Yeah, sure. So what we typically look for, we start with a blood test. Blood tests are very accepted and common, but mind you, the saliva test can be very important because they do check the free fraction of the hormone. Here's what I mean by that. 97% of all of the hormones in your body are bound to a protein, which means it can't be used until it leaves that protein. That protein is called a binding globulin, but really just think of it this way. Hormones travel through your bloodstream, and in order to do so, they need a vehicle. Let's say they need an Uber, and the Uber is that binding protein, and the hormone can't get out of the Uber. The hormone can't affect anything unless it gets out of the Uber and goes in the ability to do its work. So what happens with birth control pills and things like that is you can have a lot of hormone produced and it gets stuck in the Uber. So it looks like you have plenty of hormone, but you're not using it. So saliva testing can be very helpful because it's only checking that 3%, which we call the free fraction. But we can also check free fraction hormones in blood. So we typically look at, in women especially, we look at testosterone. Far and away, and this is going to be a takeaway and quite shocking to people, and it's indisputable, but for women, far and away, the most abundant and consequential sex hormone you have is not estrogen, it is testosterone. Let me say that again. Testosterone is far more abundant and consequential to women than estrogen is. Yet we think men have testosterone, women have estrogen. Well, men have both testosterone and estrogen. Women have both testosterone and estrogen. Nothing impacts testosterone more than blood sugar. And also, we have to recognize that, when we look at the blood for testosterone, we'll check total testosterone, compare it to free testosterone. That's important. But for women, testosterone is typically the hormone related to libido. So if sex drive is a question, just checking estrogen and progesterone and FSH and LH and finding out where you are in menopause is not the answer. You have to know what your testosterone is. And again, all of these things are impacted not just by birth control pills. I didn't want to pick on birth control pills here. There are toxins in our environment more abundant today than any time that we've ever had before. Plastics and things of that nature that are called endocrine disruptors. The word endocrine just means hormone. So hormone disruptors are in our environment. They're in our medications, in our food, in our plastics. They're in the flame retardant chemicals that are in your new furniture. They're in the flame retardant chemicals in your children's pajamas. So we are living in a more toxic world, and removing those toxins is a lot like removing excess hormones, like in birth control pills, and that taxes the liver. In order for the liver to remove that stuff from the body, you need something called methyl donors. Methyl donors are very important parts of healthy B vitamins. And 20% of the American public has some kind of genetic variant in how well they can methylate. So when we're talking about lab tests, finding out if you have a variant in your methylation genes, and there are several that we check, that can be very helpful in understanding your ability to detoxify from the world around you, the medications you're taking, the blood sugar that you're experiencing. That's why we're all a little bit different. Now, I know I just made you all drink water out of a fire hose on that question. There is a lot to know, but I think if you just go back and listen to it again, you might be able to follow me there. It's not that complicated.
And that's why I love having you on, is because, as I said, you're oftentimes the person that I go to when I've got these questions that are a little outside of my knowledge base. And then me trying to come back and relay that third person, it can be difficult. That's why I really appreciate your time coming on here and sharing this stuff. So as we wrap up, a couple of quick hitters. What are things that people, the 20 and 30-year-olds, what can they be doing right now what can they be watching for? What can they make sure that they're doing? Are there resources of learning about where can we avoid these hormone disruptors? What are some things that they could do to understand better how to decrease that in their life? Because not just for hormone regulation for people, knowing they're going to experience menopause someday, but for men and women alike, that's things that we need to know about and avoid.
Okay, first of all, you're not going to get this information from your primary care doctor's office. It's just not going to happen. Not because they're bad people or they're not smart or anything like that. It has more to do with what their emphasis and focus is for their community and their patients, and that has more to do with what happens when things go badly. And that's fine. We need them in our communities. If you are 20 to 30 years old and you want to know more about this, of course you would want to get with an office. You want to have a primary wellness provider. A primary wellness provider will never be your PCP. Your primary medical provider or your primary care physician is different. You need one of those, but they're different. A primary wellness provider is really somebody like myself and the doctors at Life Refined Chiropractic and other chiropractic offices around the country, because chiropractors are becoming leaders in understanding the normal physiology, how to best navigate the modern world to make sure your physiology is normal as it relates to sleep, exercise, stresses of posture and things that you're going through in the workplace, even to the point of dealing with mental stress, et cetera. And, Dr. Nate, I've known you for a very long time, and you and Dr. Stacy have made your office kind of a mecca for that kind of information. So putting your body in as normal of an environment as possible sounds obvious, but do we really know what normal is? And my answer to that is no, we don't, because we've been living in an abnormal world for so long. Things that we consider to be normal, very abnormal for our physiology, right? I always say physiologically no different than our hunter-gatherer ancestors of a few thousand years ago. So that's the first step, and you're going to get that kind of information from offices like yours. Now, if there's a challenge a set of symptoms, I know that you're going to bring me in on the case, right? And we can co-manage those cases. We've been very successful with that in the past.
Yeah, exactly. So for those of you that weren't able to join us on the live today, I know that there are, as you're watching this replay, you've got questions, and oh, I wish I could have known how to ask this. I would have liked to have that answered. Reach out to us. Get on to this. You'll see this on Facebook. You also see it probably through our website. Either get in contact with Dr. Stacy or myself directly, post your questions below, and we can answer to the best of our ability. And if necessary, as we said, bring in Dr. G. But these are really, these are things that every family faces. And these are things that can be very scary because you don't know where to get the best information. Who do I trust? My doctor says this is normal for me to be going through, but I don't feel like this is normal at all. So in those situations, that's where having a primary wellness practitioner is going to be of such great benefit to you, to have someone who can give you answers like this. And that's exactly where the topic for this live came from, was, from our friends and practice members that say, hey, tell us about female hormone stuff, because this seems scary. It seems like I get different information. So Dr. G, I really appreciate your time today. I can tell you right now, just from the feedback we've already gotten, that our next live will be on that topic. We've hit on both these first two interviews will be intermittent fasting and time restricted eating. What does that mean? How does it work, and why is it so beneficial? And what it can do for people's health long term. To reiterate, I think everything that you said in our first interview and today, all folk boils down to the more we can prepare our body to be what, as we refer to in the office, an unhospitable host to bad bacteria and viruses that negatively affect us, or just lifestyle stress. How do we make our bodies set it up for success as much as possible? Chiropractic actually plays a role in that, but so does all the other things about the stress in our environment, whether it's emotional, physical, chemical stress, how our body responds to that hormonally, how it does it through blood sugar. All those things play such a huge role. I think we can't emphasize enough that, and as opposed to waiting until you get sick and figuring out how to get out of that situation, setting ourselves up for success today is really the right answer.
And thank you so much for having me. And I'm really enjoying this. I love answering questions, and I just want your audience to know we're happy to continue this as long as there are questions that need to be answered, because that's what we do, right? We make the world a better and healthier place. But I also want to make sure everybody understands, I'm just Dr. G. I don't have all the answers. I have good answers when it's in my area of specialty, but I'm also very good at finding answers. So, I'll always let you know and your audience know, wow, I just can't answer that, but maybe the next time around, I'll be able to come back with some new information that could be helpful for that question.
Yep. Well, thank you all for watching today and in the future via this recording. Please feel free to reach out, ask your questions. These are the topics that are pressing in our community's mind, and our entire purpose for Life Refined Chiropractic is helping our community live their life closer to their 100% potential, and answering your questions on what's taking you away from that 100% potential is how we're going to do it best. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much again, Dr. G. I'll talk with you again soon, and we'll look forward to being with you guys again in the near future. Be well.
Thank you.